Well, welcome everyone. The uncomfortable silence is over. We're so happy you're joining us, friends, colleagues, interested patrons. We're just so grateful that you're here. On behalf of Pitkin County Library and my talented publicity and program developing colleagues, thank you for joining us in this first of 9 programs in our Read Wider series. This evening, we welcome Anne-Marie Moyes and Ndume Olatushani. You may recall Anne-Marie was here in Aspen in 2019 as an expert panelist discussing mass incarceration, a topic that was relevant to the Aspen Words Literary Prize winner of that year, American Marriage. That was the title. At the time, we knew Anne-Marie was an expert in her field, but we did not know how present and to what depth unjust incarceration was part of her personal life. We will hear from Ndume and Anne-Marie this evening, but it is Ndume's 27 years in prison and the life he has built after his exoneration that will be our focus. One more thing. Ndume's telling his story is in the genre tradition of own voices. These are the stories that land in our souls and help us build our humanity. And for that, we are so glad to have Ndume and Anne-Marie Moyes here with us. Thank you.
Well, we're so glad to be here, and we're grateful to everybody who showed up tonight to hear our story. So I am the director of the Korey Wise Innocence Project at the University of Colorado Law School, and so wrongful convictions is a passion of mine. But how that became my passion, as Martha said, is the very personal story of my husband, Ndume Olatushani, and our many-year fight to get him out of prison. So I'm going to start, I'm going to talk for the first half of our presentation and then let Ndume talk, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to tell the legal story of his case and what happened, how we finally were able to win his freedom, and then he'll talk at length about his personal journey of surviving 27 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. What I'm going to do is I have a PowerPoint presentation that will just make it a little easier to follow. We have like 3 pets, and of course they're making noise right now, so sorry about that. I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to share that. As I said, it'll make it a little easier to follow the kind of complicated legal story of his case. So let me go ahead and share that. Okay. So, first, I just want to talk a little bit of giving an overview of wrongful convictions and giving you some numbers that you might find interesting, because then when we talk about Ndume's story, I think it will help you root this in some of the big picture data that we have. So it's difficult to estimate what percentage of people who are charged with crimes, convicted of crimes, are actually innocent. But there are some pretty reliable studies that peg that number at about 5% of criminal cases. So when you just think of how many people we incarcerate in this country, it's a pretty astounding number to think that as many as 5% of those people are innocent. And in the last 30 years, particularly with all of the DNA exonerations that have taken place, we have some pretty good data about their common features. And so this is some data from the National Registry of Exonerations, and they make an effort to track every exoneration in the United States. And these are kind of the breakdowns of some of these common features that they see, or you might call them contributing factors. So in 57% of the cases, there was some perjured testimony. In an astounding 45% of cases, there was official misconduct. That could be misconduct by police or prosecutors. In about 30%, there was mistaken eyewitness identification. In at least a quarter, there was an inadequate legal defense. Flawed or misleading forensics was present in about a quarter of the cases, and close to 13% involved a false confession. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of these common features that you see in cases of wrongful conviction. And then, as I said, when we tell Ndume's story, I think you'll see how some of these factors played a big role in his case and the injustice that happened. Let me just make sure that. Okay, I just want to make sure that, okay. I'm sorry, I'm just fixing something on my screen here. Okay. Okay, I want to move this now. Sorry. Okay, I accidentally opened my chat window and I don't know how to stop it. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Okay, this will help. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about Ndume's case and what happened. He was wrongly convicted of a crime that happened in Memphis, Tennessee. The crime happened way back in 1983. It happened on a Sunday morning at about 8:30 in the morning. And several people went into this Food Right grocery store with the intent to rob it. And what they didn't realize when they went in the store is that the store owner who was working one of the registers was actually armed. And so at some point during the robbery, when that became clear, one of the perpetrators approached the store owner, saw that he was armed. In a moment of panic, that person ended up shooting Mr. Valencia, the store owner, and he was killed. So there were about 10 people, 10 customers in the store when it happened, and they consistently described that there were 2 Black men and 1 Black woman who had come into the store to rob it. Very soon after the crime, the police got a big lead. They found a car that had been abandoned nearby, and it became clear very quickly that that was the getaway car that the perpetrators had used. And the police in Memphis found out that that car had been stolen from a Hertz rental car agency at the St. Louis airport. So pretty quickly, the police were focusing on potential suspects from St. Louis. So Ndume is from St. Louis. The police and prosecution never explained, out of all of the people in St. Louis, how they came upon him as a suspect and then decided to build this case around him, but that's what happened. And the state's case at trial was comprised of about 4 pieces, and these are what the pieces were. So of the 10 customers in the store, there was one man named Tommy Perkins, and he was walking out of the store as the perpetrators were entering, and he admitted to police that he had seen one of the gunmen just very briefly, but he gave a very tentative identification. He identified Ndume, but said he was not more than 80% sure of his identification. So pretty soon after the crime, the police got another tip, and it was an anonymous tip. And the tipster said that whoever committed the crime had been staying at the home of Elizabeth Starks and her boyfriend, Dennis Williams, that weekend. And so before trial, both Elizabeth and Dennis gave statements to the police in which they implicated Ndume and said that he was at their house that weekend in the getaway car. They said they hadn't previously met him, but that he had come to their house with a friend and stayed with them. Ms. Starks, though, on cross-examination admitted that she only identified Ndume's photograph after police kept putting his photograph and his photograph alone in front of her. Dennis Williams gave a pre-trial statement, but once he got to trial, he refused to cooperate and said that he didn't remember anything. Both Elizabeth and Dennis were granted immunity in exchange for their testimony. That's something that happens a lot in criminal cases. We sometimes call it incentivized testimony. So in some ways, we should be pretty suspicious of testimony where people are getting a huge benefit in exchange for it, but often juries will find that testimony to be credible nevertheless. So that's pretty significant that they were both granted immunity so that they could never be charged with any involvement in the crime. Then there was a woman named Beverly Batts who was a casual acquaintance of Ndume, and she testified that Ndume had confessed to her that he committed a murder in Memphis, but she was able to give no details of that. so-called confession. And then the police claimed that they found Ndume's palm print on the exterior of the getaway car. So that was the state's case against him at trial. Ndume actually had an alibi defense, so he didn't even know that he was a suspect in this crime until months after it happened, but he was fortunate because he knew exactly where he was that weekend. As I said, the crime happened on October 2nd, a Sunday morning, and that previous day was his mother's birthday. Ndume comes from a really large family. He's the 7th of 11 children, and that Saturday night, they had a big party for his mother, and there were lots of witnesses, 30 or more witnesses who all insisted he was at that party until the early morning hours on Sunday. There were other witnesses that said they saw him for different reasons in St. Louis on throughout the day on Sunday. And in fact, Ndume had never even been to the state of Tennessee until he was brought down to stand trial. But he was convicted. In December of 1985, he was tried by an all-white jury in a majority Black city. So the prosecution actually used all of their, what we call peremptory strikes, to eliminate all African-American potential jurors from the pool. And then the jury unanimously voted to impose the death penalty. So he was not only convicted, but also sentenced to death. So then, you start a very long appeals process. I mean, as we said at the beginning, Ndume was in prison for 27 years. That's a really long time, and appeals take a really long time. So it was a long fight through many layers of appeals in state court before he finally got relief. It was 10 years after his conviction that finally his defense lawyers were able to get a copy of the full police and prosecution files for the first time. And this is where the case against him really started to unravel, because in those files, there was a mountain of evidence that pointed to a completely different group of people as being responsible for the crime. The state had an obligation to turn over that evidence to his lawyers at the time of trial. They didn't do so, and instead they buried it. But then, like I said, 10 years later, we finally get access to these files. And in the files, as I said, there was this mountain of evidence that all pointed to this alternate group of suspects that we called the Brown Gang. And it was made up of Michael Brown, his brother Eric Brown, their cousin by marriage, Charles Keller, and two women, Betty Jo Ford and Darby Cunningham, who were involved with a couple of the men and did prostitution for them.
Among other things.
So what was the withheld evidence against the Brown Gang? There were two eyewitnesses who identified members of the Brown Gang. There was a witness in the store who said she had looked the shooter in the eye, and she said that she identified Michael Brown from a large array of photographs that included Ndume's photographs. So she's shown a large array, doesn't pick out Ndume's photograph, picks out Michael Brown as the shooter. There was a witness outside the store. This was a teenager, and he had seen the perpetrators changing a license plate on a car, on the getaway car. And he knew that something fishy was up. So he went back home and told his mother and said, I see this suspicious behavior, what should I do? And his mother said, when you walk back by, you better pay close attention because you might need to report something about it. So he did just that. And when the police showed him a photo array, he immediately picked out Michael Brown's picture, Michael Brown's cousin by marriage, Charles Keller, as the two men he had seen changing the license plate. The Brown Gang actually had a recent history of stealing rental cars from the Hertz rental agency at the St. Louis airport. So that's where the getaway car was stolen. The Memphis police contacted the St. Louis airport police and said, hey, have you had a problem with other rental cars? They said, yes, these are our suspects in this string of similar thefts: Michael Brown, Eric Brown, Charles Keller. So the police also developed a witness who said he had seen members of the Brown Gang in the getaway car just a couple weeks before the crime happened. And there were also items in the getaway car that further implicated the Brown Gang. So what police knew about them is that they would conduct prostitution at truck stops on the route between Memphis and Chicago. And in the getaway car, there was a lottery ticket from Chicago. There were receipts from truck stops along the way. So this was very consistent with their pattern of criminal activity. There was also withheld evidence about the palm print. This was the one piece of physical evidence that linked Ndume to the crime. As I said, it was found purportedly on the outside of the getaway car. It emerged late in the investigation after the police already and prosecution had decided to indict Ndume. But what they had suppressed is that there was a police report that showed that in the early stages of their investigation, they had compared Ndume's prints and that they had said that they did not match. And at that time, the police had a copy of his palm print. So it was a palm print that they said was on the outside of the getaway car. And like I said, their early report said there was no match. And then also there was a police report that they withheld that gave an inventory of every place on the car where they lifted a print. And according to their own inventory, they did not lift a print from the part of the car where they later claimed to have found Ndume's print. So we thought on appeal that we had this great claim. So, under this case, this famous case, Brady v. Maryland, the state has an obligation to turn over any evidence that they've collected in their own investigation that's favorable to the defendant. They have to turn that over before trial. And if they don't, and if it's pretty powerful exculpatory evidence, then you have a good claim on appeal. So we thought we had a great claim because there was all this evidence against the Browns that was withheld. But the Tennessee courts, they found that, yes, it's true that the prosecution withheld it. Yes, it was favorable, but they just decided it wouldn't have made a difference to the outcome. So they essentially declared that the error was harmless and they upheld his conviction. So now at this point, we're how many years into your incarceration when the court upheld your conviction? Maybe bumping on 20 years.
Yeah, that
right?
was
Like close to 20 years. So, at this point, he's been in for 20 years, kind of slugging it out in the appeals courts and not getting relief. And at this point, I had met Ndume a few years earlier, and I had gotten involved in trying to get him lawyers and doing different things, but I decided to go to law school. And once I graduated from law school, I decided, okay, something more needs to happen. Somebody needs to do the thorough investigation of this case that never happened. And so that's what I ended up doing. And over a period of about 3 years, I traveled all around the country, tracking down every witness that was mentioned anywhere in the police reports of any significance. It was super time consuming, but also really fascinating. And this is what I found. So we did catch up with Tommy Perkins, the one eyewitness who had made this tentative identification of Ndume. He was locked up in a county jail at the time. And he gave us some more detail about the level of police misconduct involved in getting his identification. So he said that the police only showed him photos of one person, Ndume, which is completely inappropriate, highly suggestive. It makes any identification very unreliable, obviously. He also said that when he came to trial to testify, the police and I guess it was the prosecution told him, don't be fooled by his disguise. He might have changed his appearance. So if he doesn't look the same, don't let that fool you. You need to make an identification anyway. We also found out some stuff about Beverly Batts that we previously didn't know. The prosecution had made promises to her to expunge her criminal record if she testified against him. The state's supposed to disclose those kind of promises they make to somebody. They didn't do that. We also found out that she had a history of committing perjury and making false allegations against other people. And she had a history of serious mental illness. Can you put a light on because it's getting dark? Yeah, go ahead and put a light on.
Table.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. The light conditions have changed. Let me just move to this. Okay. Okay, I think that's good.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so that kind of left us with, the evidence that's left now after we were able to take down those parts of the state's case was Elizabeth Starks and Dennis Williams. They had said the perpetrators were at their home. The court, when it denied the Brady claim, had put a lot of weight on Elizabeth Starks' testimony. And so we were thinking, we really wanted to find a way to undermine what they had said. So when I went to see Dennis Williams, he was living in Minnesota and I traveled there and he immediately recanted. It's almost like it had been weighing on his conscience for a lot of years and he was glad to get it off of his chest. And he admitted that he knew that he had basically falsely identified Ndume only because of the enormous pressure that he felt that he was under, that he was very scared that they were going to charge him, that, you know, Elizabeth had already given a statement and they basically told him, you need to say whatever she said. And so that's the only reason why he gave that statement pre-trial. And then that left us with Elizabeth Starks. And so when I was combing through the police reports, I mean, this seems like kind of an obvious thing to wonder at this point, but if the people who committed the crime were at her house that weekend, then it must have been the Brown gang that was at her house that weekend. So what kind of connection might she have had to them? So I noticed in the police reports that Betty Jo Ford, one of the prostitutes that worked with the Brown gang, that she had given an address to the police on Dyson Street. That she had said that that was an address where she previously lived. And I knew from my mastery of all of these reports that Elizabeth Stark's family also lived on Dyson Street. So that's what got me thinking that that was the connection, that Betty Jo Ford, this member of the Brown gang, had a relationship with Elizabeth Starks, one of the key state's witnesses. And so that's what we ended up finding out. I went to see Darby Cunningham, the other prostitute who worked for the Brown gang. She was in federal prison at the time. And I asked her, I said, you know, do you know who Elizabeth Starks is? And she said, no, I've never heard of that person. Well, her family lives over on, what was the street that I just said? Dyson Street. You know, you might know them, you know, her mother is this name. I kept giving her these different kind of triggers, trying to see if I could spark her memory. And it wasn't working. And I was about to give up. And then I said, well, you might know her as Liz. And then she lit up and she said, oh, Liz, that's Betty Jo's cousin. They were thick as thieves. Like when you saw one, you always saw the other. And so then we, over time, developed 3 other witnesses who said exactly the same thing, that they had been friends since they were teenagers, that they were just really tight, that, you know, people would say, every time I seen Betty, I see Liz. They were just that close.
People held them out as family.
Yes, they held themselves out. They weren't actually cousins, but they would tell people they were cousins because that's how close they were. So finally, based on all of that new evidence that we found, so, you know, the court at this point is aware of all the evidence that the state withheld about the Browns, but now we have all this new evidence that we brought before the court on what you call a new evidence petition, and the court finally heard us. And on December 9th of 2011, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals vacated Ndume's conviction. They were most, I think what they found most compelling was this connection between Elizabeth Starks and the Brown gang. So then after almost 28 years in prison, after a law firm that took on his case in 1995. So there was a law firm in New York that took his case pro bono. They spent 17,000 billable hours on his case. The conviction was overturned. But you know, when your conviction is overturned, it doesn't mean that you get out. What it means is that you have a right to another trial. The state, you go back to square one to start again. And Memphis is a pretty corrupt jurisdiction in a lot of ways. And they were threatening to retry him, and Ndume was moved down to the county jail. We were told that he would probably sit there for 2 or 3 years before he would get a retrial. We were told that the state almost definitely would try him again, even if they knew that they would likely lose. But they came to him and they said, you know, we're offering you an Alford plea. And that's a kind of plea where you can go into court and you can maintain your innocence, but you say you're pleading in your best interest. So they made him this offer that if he pled to a lesser charge of second-degree murder, he could walk out that day. And so that's what he decided to do. And then it was on June 1st of 2012 that he walked out of jail. And I do have this video of those first moments. That's the jail right in the building right behind that you can see. So this is just like a minute before he walked out. And let me play this video for you.
A minute after I walked out.
After, did I say before? A minute after he walked out. Hold on one second.
I was thinking it was going to be later today.
When did you first hear you were getting out?
What time was it? No.
When y'all find out?
This morning. We got a letter.
Oh, today gave
We went to the clerk's office. We got the letter.
Right. Oh, man. Oh, man, it's such a beautiful day. Man, it's a beautiful day. Oh. Oh. This is a beautiful day, y'all.
Even though it's a cold day.
I love it. I think it's so nice out here. You hung around.
Really? Oh, that's great.
Man, it's such a lovely day, y'all. Feel good, don't it? Feels really good.
So I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen now and just let Ndume talk for a while, but at some point you can pull it back up because I have a couple of photos of your artwork.
Well, you'll be right here. You can.
Okay. Well, I know I moved through that kind of quickly. I think I was just wanting to make sure that we had plenty of time for Ndume to talk and then for you guys to ask any questions that you have and for us to have a little discussion. But with that, I will leave it to Ndume to tell you a bit about his journey through all of this nightmare.
Well, I want to first start by saying that I'm really happy that you guys are that we're able to participate with you guys and just kind of share our story. I think the work my wife is doing and so many people doing around this issues of innocent people, mass incarceration, all these criminal justice issues. I'm really happy and proud to just kind of be a part of this and inspired by you guys coming and hearing our story and hopefully going out and getting in a good fight. I want to, I guess I'll first kind of pick up, I was just sitting there thinking when Anne-Marie was talking about this court ruling on June the 9th.
December 9th.
December the 9th, this court ruling where the courts had finally overturned my my conviction, and was remanding me back for a new trial. I was just thinking about that when I actually didn't learn about, during the time that this stuff was actually happening, I was actually away from the prison that I was being housed at, because at that point, they had took me to another prison where I was having a psychological evaluation because I had went up for parole. I had stayed in prison long enough to actually go up for parole. And so I was actually away from the prison. I came back on the 9th, as a matter of fact. The day this stuff actually happened is when they brought me from this other prison back to the prison where I was being housed at. And I had no idea about, what had actually happened, because soon I got back to the prison, I was just trying to get settled in. And so I went and actually called my attorneys because I wanted to, I guess it was a week or more, I hadn't had a chance to talk with them, because when they took me for this psychological evaluation to see was I suitable for being released on parole, I was unable to make phone calls, and I was pretty much just kind of locked in the cell for 24 hours a day, the time that I was actually there. But so when I got back to the prison and and was able to put my stuff up and take a shower, took a quick shower, because I think that the week or more I was gone, I actually didn't take but a couple of showers, because this is how they actually run the prison. But so I jumped in the shower, got out of the shower, and I actually attempted to call Anne-Marie, but I didn't get on the phone. So I just said, I'm gonna call these lawyers and just check in with them and let them know what happened on this evaluation stuff and just to catch up or whatever. And so when I called them, they actually thought I was calling because I knew that this ruling had just happened that very day, and they was actually in the office celebrating. And so, so when I called, and I was talking to them, and I was just trying to explain to them about, you know, this evaluation stuff. And one of the attorneys just said, do you know what happened? I mean, you know anything about this court ruling or whatever? I'm telling them, no, I don't know nothing about this. And so, so at that point, they all just kind of, you know, was just excited and was, you know, just telling me that we had finally got the relief that we had been seeking all the many years. And that's, you know, my conviction was overturned and I was remanded back for a new trial. And so, like I said, when I'm sitting here and just kind of listening to her telling this, I just kind of, you know, thought back about, you know, how that kind of played out for me. And I can't even tell you. I mean, I know you guys seen me walking out of this this horrible county jail, the Shelby County Jail in Memphis. Horrible county jail. You guys seen that video of me walking out there after nearly 28 years of being incarcerated. And but I'm telling you guys, even though that you kind of see that the video, it kind of belies the truth about not only how happy I was when you looking at this video, but also too, like I said, on December the 9th, the day that I came back from having this evaluation, parole evaluation, how happy I was getting that information. It was like it was almost like I had a 1,000-pound gorilla lifted off my back. It's like you know, I just kind of immediately kind of felt this, you know, kind of relief and you know, the pressure of actually everything that I had been through and was going through at the time. And so so yeah, I was really happy about that. And I guess in terms of you know, some of I don't know what you guys, you know about prison, if you ever been inside a prison, visiting, you know, just whatever. But prison in this country is I mean, a really hard life. I mean, you hear a lot of time, you know, people outside, politicians particularly, talk about people sitting in prison and, you know, they sitting back watching cable TV and, you know, living these luxurious lives. But I'm telling you, that's so far from the truth. I really don't even have no words to tell you guys how false that really is. Like I said, prison is a hard life for the people that's sitting there that's guilty. And you can probably imagine for somebody like myself and millions, many thousands of others that's sitting in prison right now in this country for things that they didn't actually do. And so it's even harder. But fortunately for me, I, like my wife said, I came from a lawyer's family. All of them knew I hadn't committed the crime. All people that, you know, knew me, they knew I hadn't committed the crime. So I was fortunate in that I always had my family and friends and people around me that that supported me, you know, when I was, you know, at my lowest. I always had my family and people around me that was supporting me and keeping me, you know, just kind of keeping me hopeful and moving forward. And while I'm saying this, I would certainly say to you guys that, I mean, it was people like yourselves that care about these issues, care about what was happening, not only to me, but people sitting where I was sitting. And so I just want to thank you guys and let you know how important it really is for people sitting inside to know that it is people outside that they don't even know that care about them, the conditions, and you know, just kind of the things that they actually going through. So I certainly want to thank you guys from that. You know, in terms of my experience, like I said, I knew I was fortunate even when I was sitting on death row. I always knew I was fortunate than a lot of people that was around me because I always had hope. I was one of the people that I always knew that, you know, the day would actually come that the truth would prevail and I would actually be free. I mean, certainly there were, you know, fleeting moments where I felt some despair and just sadness. And I mean, I'm sitting in prison, I'm sitting on death row. So all that stuff happened, but there was always kind of fleeting moments for me, because even when I was going through that and felt that stuff, you know, I would quickly get right back on track that, you know, being hopeful that, you know, time, you know, and the truth would actually prevail. You know, so like I said, I always was fortunate in that way. One of the things, though, that I think that you know, I would like to share, you know, what I was saying before about, you know, just how, you know, how hard living in prison is for people in this country. I think that we treat people so inhumanely that it's almost I don't know how a lot of people expect that people coming out of prison going to somehow come out and be productive people and, you know, contribute in positive ways to society, community, family, and all these things after being subjected to some of the harshest environments and treatment that people are subject to sitting in prison. And so, I mean, an example of this is that, you know, when I was sentenced to death row, and I really was one of them angry, I really was an angry Black man that, you know, based on some of the stuff that I was actually going through. But, you know, if you can imagine, if you guys can imagine, and I would suggest this to you that, you know, tonight when you're brushing your teeth or you're going in your bathroom for whatever you got to go in there for, just try to imagine having to live in there 24 hours a day in your bathroom, because the cell, certainly one of the cells that I was in early on was only 4 by 9 feet. I couldn't even stretch my arms out like this here from wall to wall, because it was, like I said, it was a 4 foot by 9 foot cell. And so, like I said, this was, most people bathrooms is bigger than the cell that many people in this country every day are, you know, being relegated to, like I said, for 23 to 24 hours of the day. You know, so like I said, when you guys go in your bathroom tonight, just try to imagine having to live in there, do everything in there. I mean, when I was sitting on death row, the only thing that I was brought out of my cell for was the time that you had, the rec time that they would give you outside of your cell on the concrete cage yard. That so you would get your time out for that. And the only other thing that you came out of your cell for, if you was fortunate enough to get a visit, and most people sitting in prisons do not get visit. You came out for a visit if you was fortunate enough to have somebody to come and see you. And also too, the only other thing that you came out of your cell for, I mean, really would be to, if they had to take you to the prison, hospital, or infirmary, whatever you want to call it, that otherwise you pretty much did everything in your cell. And every time they brought me out of my cell, I had to be escorted by 2 officers, which meant that first off, they would chain and shackle me, shackle my legs, chain around my waist, and handcuff me. So I was chained and shackled before I can even be moved out of my cell. And so they would actually, depending on the day it was, that what they was trying to accomplish or not accomplish, that it would take the guards would come. It would take them anywhere from I would say 12 to 15 minutes, if they was actually you know, just kind of doing what they should have been doing, to chain and shackle me, to actually take me and give me a less than 10-minute shower. Many times, matter of fact, they at one point they had a timer on the showers. You got 5 minutes in the shower, they would cut the timer on. And so and the timer would automatically shut the water off. So if you didn't do everything that you need to do in 5 minutes, then, and there was a couple of times that that I was caught with soap still on me and that stuff there. And fortunately, the officers at the time gave me a few more minutes to just try to wash the soap off. But I was fortunate in that way because there was many times where people would be in there and you can hear them because the way the prison was made, there was these, what you kind of see in the movie sometime where you got these chairs and the board cells and so you can hear, you know, people in the shower arguing with the officers about not having enough time. They need to cut the water on so they can get the soap off them. And so all this kind of stuff was happening. But like I said, I was fortunate enough the couple of times that I got caught like that, the officer gave me, you know, a little more time to actually rinse off. But like I said, you know, when you have, most of the, I think that if you drive by a prison in this country, I don't care where you at. I mean, you look, you know, it's clean, manicured lines, and you know all these, you know, the whole 9 yards. I mean, but for the fences, it could look like a college campus. Most of the prisons do in this country, but I'm telling you that kind of belies the truth about, you know, the just kind of mental and physical deprivations that people are facing every day across this country, because you have an industry, a whole industry then cropped up around locking people up. I mean, locking people up is a huge industry. I mean, there's hundreds of billions of dollars is involved in locking people up, and that simply means in this country somebody going to jail, whether you did it or didn't do it. In my case, I hadn't done it. But it's such a industry, and there is no incentive, like I said, in terms of how people are being treated inside of prison, because for the most part, the people that's in the prison industry definitely want people to come out of prison and recidivate back in the prison. So if you bring a person in, I'm really happy about what just happened with these Pell Grants being given back, and prisoners are allowed to actually get an education in prison. You know, because statistics certainly show that those people sitting in prison that get an education, particularly a college degree while they're sitting there, or even just a GED, a lot of them certainly do not come back, recidivate back into the system. So like I said, it's really no incentive for the people that's making money off of people sitting in prison to actually do this, because obviously they want people sitting in their cells because that's how they get paid. But you know, one of the things that, like I said, I was so fortunate, and I still consider myself to be fortunate, the fact that I'm sitting here and able to talk with you guys now, because but for my wife and other good people getting involved, family members, and just sticking with me, I have no doubt that I wouldn't be sitting here. I would have certainly been executed. And I'm sure whoever these people are that, you know, go and look at the names of the people that's been executed in this country, or however they do it, then I'm sure that they would have got to my name and said that I was just another one of them people that got nothing more than what I deserve, and that was death. So, so I'm fortunate in that way. You know, like I said, I think that, you know, for me, being able to, you know, while I was in prison, I was one of them people that, like I said, I was always preparing for freedom, because I never gave up on the idea that one day I wouldn't be free. So I was one of them people that got a GED while I was sitting on death row. And some people around me, they, you know, looked at me, you know, kind of funny, you know, and I'm talking about the people that were officers and people in the prison. Is like, you know, why you getting a GED? You sitting on death row. So they couldn't understand, you know, why I would be pursuing education and just trying to do everything that I possibly could to become, you know, certainly not the person that they was trying to make out that I was. And so, I mean, while I was sitting on death row, like I said, I got a GED. And one of the things that I did, and this is real quick, and I'll just kind of wrap it up. Okay, so
I
we
wanted to
doing on
show you.
time.
You want to show your art now?
Yeah, you could show, you know, one of the things that I did while I was in prison, when I was sitting on death row, and this, I'll tell this story real quick, that there was a guy on death row with me. He was an artist. And I don't know if you guys seeing this this painting here. I did that painting while I was sitting on death row, actually. That so this guy was on death row with me at the time, and he was an artist. And so I commissioned him to do a portrait because a portrait of me because I wanted to send it to my mother or whatever. Unfortunately, my mother didn't get a chance to see it because she was killed in a car accident 2 years into my imprisonment, and that actually kind of led to me kind of finding art, because what happened, like I said, this guy did this portrait of me, and it looked nothing like me. So it's like I'm sitting in this small space in this cell, and every time I look at this portrait, I'm thinking, man, I could have did a better job and kept my money. And there was, and I think I gave him a few cartons of cigarettes at the time, because cigarettes was currency inside the prison at the time. And so I gave him this, and like I said, every time I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, man, I could have did a better job and kept my money. And so, but this thing happened to with my mother, and it was as I was trying to pick myself back up from that, that I found art. Because before me finding myself sitting on death row, I had no interest in art. I was like nothing more than what any young kid would have did in school or whatever. But other than that, I really had no interest in art. And even though that I say that, but I also too know that I was an artist long before I found myself sitting on death row. I just hadn't had the space for it to actually, my creativity to not only be explored, but just kind of, being able to demonstrate that however it came out. But so when I'm trying to pick myself back up from this deal that happened to my mother, and I'm telling you, I was flat. I couldn't be hurt no more after that happened. That's the worst thing that, anybody, certainly sitting in prison, even though I know it's true wherever we at in life. Nobody want to get no phone call talking about, something tragic can happen to you, their mother or anybody in their family for that matter. But that was one of the things that I certainly dreaded the most while I was sitting in prison, is that, something like this would actually happen to people in my family. And so a couple of years into my imprisonment, the people came to my cell, and I told you how long they have to cuff you up and chain and shackle me around my waist and ankles and this stuff here. They came to my cell and was telling me that they had to take me downstairs so I can make a phone call home. And it was, when they came and told me this, obviously I knew something bad had actually happened, because otherwise you certainly didn't get no free phone call home or none of that stuff there. And the only time they would actually give you a phone call home was if somebody then passed away in your family, and it had to be your immediate family, brother, sister, mother, father, or grandparents. And so, so when the people came to my cell and was telling me, hey, listen, you need to come on so we can cuff you up and take you down here and make this phone call home. And so when they first stepped to my cell and they telling me this, I just automatically just start, kind of thinking about what my mother gonna tell me once I got on the phone about something that happened to somebody else in my family. But unfortunately, it was my sister telling me what had happened to my mother. And like I said, I couldn't be hurt no more when I got this information. It's like, when from the time she telling me this here, and I couldn't really hardly process it really, because I really wasn't prepared to hear what she was actually saying. It was like everything, it was almost like you see this stuff in a movie, everything just kind of started slowing down. I hear what she's saying, but I just can't process it. And of course, this is happening in, you know, seconds. And, you know, when I realized what she was actually telling me, I mean, from that point, and for 3 days, if my eyes was open, I was crying. If I wasn't crying, I was balled up in the tear-soaked sleep. And, you know, and on the third day that I was balled up on this steel bunk on a 2-inch foam mattress, balled up in this tear-soaked sleep, my mother just came to me in a dream. I mean, the only thing she said, she came to me as clear as we sitting on this thing now, as clear as y'all see me now. That's how she came to me. And the only thing she said was, get up. And when she said this, I jumped straight up, because it's like, you know, this nightmare I'm actually experiencing it's over. But obviously I woke up to, you know, to the reality. It was what it was. And, but, you know, that was the thing that, like I said, kind of led me to art. And not only led me to art, but it was the thing that, you know, through my art, I met my wife. And it was, I think, you know, because of my art, people were certainly, you know, drawn a little closer, you know, just kind of proximate to my situation, where, you know, people, you know, not only was drawn to my art, but once they got a little closer, people learned about, you know, my story. And I'm really grateful. Like I said, my wife was one of them. And, you know, and you know, kind of on that note, I certainly, we was talking earlier, I think it, you know, it's so much better when, you know, we do this and, you know, we hear from people and engage with people. And that's the thing that I'm always encouraged by, engagement with people like you guys, and just hearing from you guys about how we move forward, you know, together, separately, you know, and just try to deal with this kind of daunting task of making sure that the criminal justice system work like it should be working, and that is that people are treated humanely. And on that note, you know, any questions, like she said, I think our life is kind of like an open book. If you Google our name, you certainly get a lot of stuff. But any questions that you guys have, you should certainly take this opportunity to ask. And if you got any suggestions about, you know, how and what we can and should be doing to, like I said, move this, you know, this kind of this marker further along, then we certainly up for that. So anybody with a question, please.
And Ndume, this is Martha. I'm reading a question that was submitted to our chat screen. It says, "Congratulations to you, Ndume. I don't understand, however, why you were forced to plead to a lesser crime, which you were innocent of, to be able to be released. It makes no sense."
I totally agree, but I totally agree. It don't make no sense. And I'll say this, and my wife, she can certainly better answer that than I can from a legal perspective. But the thing that I say about this alpha plea, is what they call it, is really not, you know, for the person that, like I find myself, it's really just kind of this way for the state to be absolved from any responsibility of what they actually done. And so, and I mean, it's just like when you talk about, I entered into this alpha plea, and the day that I entered into it, I was actually supposed to be released, but you know, I entered into the alpha plea on a Wednesday, but it wasn't till Friday morning, that video that you actually seen, that I finally got out of that county jail. I should have left that Wednesday, but they squeezed another 2 days out of me. But she can answer that question.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not uncommon for wrongful convictions to get settled in this way. And like Ndume said, it is this way for the state to save face and to avoid any civil liability, because you still have a conviction. And so you can't sue them for what happened to you.
Right.
You don't get any compensation for what happened to you, and they can still claim to be in the right. Like they don't have to wrestle with and admit the wrong that they did. So
Yeah,
it's
not have to
not
apologize.
uncommon that it happens. I mean, I think, you know, Ndume's lawyers actually, before the Alford plea happened, they put together this binder of all these materials and met with the DA in Memphis and just said, look, you have no case, like just do the right thing here. And they gave different reasons why they weren't willing to do that. But one of them was they expressly said that they didn't want to be civilly liable. So that's definitely part of the, you know, a big part of it.
And I would say this real quick, and I see we got other questions. I would just add to that, that like I was telling you guys, I actually went up for parole. I was stayed in prison long enough to go up for parole, and I was, in spite of all the information and people were saying, I was actually granted parole. And so, but for a week or more,
Yeah, it's
I
kind of
would,
complicated.
right, but for a week or more, I would actually been out on the streets on parole when my case became, when they actually gave me a new trial. And
Let me clarify two things about that. Ndume was on death row for 20 years, but one of the things that happened in his appeals process is that his sentence got overturned,
right.
and then he was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole. And so he came up for parole, and the second time he came up, they granted it to him. And that happened right around the same time his case got overturned. And so he was like 2 weeks away from getting out on parole, and then his case was overturned. So then that parole grant became invalid because he no longer had a conviction or sentence to be paroled from. It was like this weird, quirky thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I would have been home. But you know, like I said, they actually that happened in between. You know, me coming home. But and I only say that to say that I wanted to make that point because when, like Anne-Marie said, when my lawyers went to the prosecutors, was showing them that they didn't have a case, and we had exposed them for all the you know, the wrongdoing that they did and everything. And one of the things that my lawyers was telling them that I had just been granted parole and I would actually be out on the streets, and so you know, so they should have just went on and did the right thing. But like she said, they was just trying to save face because they didn't want to take the responsibility for what they had.
That sounds like something that would happen. Yeah. Here's my question. Your art is amazing, Ndume.
Well, thanks.
Didn't you do any bad paintings? And then I said, you know, when you, I mean, at least when you started, so sometime it'd be fun to see some of your bad paintings.
Right. I would say this, that one of the things that art saved my life, literally and figuratively. You know, when I was sitting in prison, just like I asked you guys earlier, if you ever been inside a jail or a prison visiting or whatever the case here, you know that these places are devoid of color. I mean, if they got paint on the, if they have paint on the wall, there's some off white, gray, or just some dull color. And so when you look at my paints, a lot of stuff that I did was really colorful. And it was, color for me was almost this form of resistance, you know, in terms of, because the one thing that I knew, that even though that I was sitting where I was sitting, the one thing that I was always in control of was my mind. I knew that they could never get inside my head and take that from me. And so, so I use color in this way that even though that I was in this, you know, colorless environment, I knew that they couldn't stop the color in my head. And so I always like to use a lot of bright colors in the stuff that I paint. That's
great. You sound like an artist. Here's a question from Ellie Scott, who is a great friend of ours. Wow, what a story. Thank you for sharing with us. What happens to the state or prosecution who obscured, buried all that evidence? Are they ever held accountable for such a miscarriage of justice?
So, I teach a class on wrongful convictions at the law school, and we recently did a unit on prosecutorial misconduct, and the statistics show that it's rare that prosecutors suffer any consequence, and when they do, it tends to be just a slap on the wrist, like a private censure or a public censure, just basically telling them, don't do that again. But that's like, I mean, and that's something when that happens, because in most cases it just happens without any consequence whatsoever.
Most of the time they promote it to
Yeah,
judges.
I mean, that's true too.
right.
If you follow the careers of prosecutors who have engaged in misconduct, by the time, years later, they're sitting on the bench, like they often, rise through the power structure.
Or end up in Congress somewhere.
Yeah. But there are just a couple of examples. There was a prosecutor in Texas who had buried evidence in a case, and he later became a judge, and he was found to be in contempt of court, and he served like 8 days in jail. And
Right.
that's one of about 2 cases nationally where there's been a consequence of that magnitude, which you think, doesn't actually sound that bad, 8 days in jail, but that was like the most extreme thing that's ever happened. And I will say that
sent people to jail for years.
Right.
I'm talking about years and years. He had sent people to jail. So the 8 days he got in jail.
right, was not
Yeah.
much. What was I going to say too? Oh, and the other thing that I will say is, some prosecutors' offices really have a culture of those kind of abuses, and the Memphis DA's office definitely does. And so, you look at Ndume's case, and even 20 years later, people in that office are caught doing the same thing. It's like there's this serial behavior, and even among individual people, they get caught multiple times, and there just aren't adequate sanctions, and it just allows it to happen with impunity.
All right. And there must be others too who, what do you do with that? I don't know. Never mind. This isn't about me. I do have some more questions here, and I want to say, I think, talk about humanity. I think we ought to maybe try to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. You've done so much, been so generous with your time and energy, although the stories truly could go on forever. One question here, did you receive any compensation for those 27 years?
No, I didn't. That was partly like Anne-Marie was just saying about, and what I said about, once I entered into the Afro plea, it absolved any responsibility, so they can, like I said, that for them was, that Afro plea is much more for the state than it is for the person that I found myself sitting. Even though it allowed for me to come home, but it absolved them of their responsibility.
Yeah, no, okay. And maybe this will be the last question, but aside from fixing the judicial system, how do you think that we as a society can repair for the time that was taken from you and other wrongfully convicted? And
Right.
I am very sorry that this happened to you and has happened to other people.
Well, listen, I certainly appreciate that. I think one of the things that, there's many things that we could do as individuals, collectively, groups and more, to actually, try to deal with some of the, the issues that's happened in the criminal justice system. One thing that I would say in terms of, like I said, most people sitting in prisons across this country or jails, but particularly prisons, don't get mail, don't get visits. And I'm telling you, these are things that can actually change a person's life. Just having some outside contact. So I would suggest one thing as an individual, what you could do to maybe change somebody's life is you could go look on the Colorado Department of Corrections or wherever you want to reach out to somebody at, and just pick somebody and send them a postcard. You ain't got to do nothing but send them a postcard and say, even if you don't want the person to write you back, just send a random postcard to say, hey, there's people out here that know you's in there. that know that you sitting there in prison. And I'm telling you, that can make a world of difference in a person's life. I think also too, in terms of, I think that we have to, and I know it's organizations, you know, involved in this stuff, and we have to certainly lend our voice and support where and when we can. And that is that for people coming home, like I said, that when you think about, you know, the recidivism rate in this country, I mean, it shouldn't be that. I mean, people should be, if you take somebody and put them in prison for 5, 6, 8, 10, 15, certainly 20 years, and even you get beyond that, it has to be some way that we as a society, we have to, you know, grapple with this truth. Most people sitting in prison coming home. So we have to decide as a society how we gonna welcome them back, because most people that come home from prison, the whole time I was sitting in prison, I never met nobody saying that, or anybody saying that I can't wait to get out of here and come back. And you know, most people that get out of prison want to come out and stay out. But if you got for instance, you got private companies that operate inside prisons across this country. Every day, you got people sitting in prison working for pennies on the dollar, producing goods for Wilson Leather, Fruit of the Loom, all these different companies that we patronize with our business that that using prison labor, paying people pennies on the dollars to make they products, and these very people. I know people that sit in prison and, you know, done this stuff for years. They can do it. Most of them can do it with their eyes closed. But once they can sit in prison and get pennies, be paid pennies on the dollar to do this work. But when them very people come home and try to go to that company that they was doing for years, working inside the prison for, and if they apply for the job, but first thing on the application, they telling you we don't hire felons. And so even though that you may have had somebody sitting in prison and got this trade, they can't even come out and work for the same company that, like I said, that they was doing that for. So, so one of the things that, like I said, that we can certainly begin to try to identify, and you can look this stuff up on, you could Google this stuff, companies having their stuff produced inside the prisons. We could go on there and see these companies, and we can start challenging these companies with saying that we know that, you know, we can get the application. You can look and see, oh yeah, we don't hire felons. And so we have to say to them people that, listen, we know this is what you're doing, but we don't want to patronize you because you part of this whole, this prison industry. Mm-hmm. And so, so we can, you know, I mean, it's really a lot that I think that, like I said, it's a lot of good organizations out there doing a lot of work around this stuff. And so we don't, it ain't like we have to try to reinvent the wheel or invent a wheel or any of this stuff here to actually get involved, because there's a lot of people and organizations out there already doing this work. And we just have to be armed with the knowledge. And I say this because knowledge makes us responsible. Once we know something, we don't have no excuse. And so, so yeah, I would just say find the organization, the individuals that's doing the work, and get involved in a good fight.
And, you know, I just want to give a little plug for Innocence Projects too, because in addition to working on individual cases like Ndume's, Innocence Projects do a lot of work of pushing reforms. So, you know, like our Innocence Project, the Korey Wise Innocence Project at Colorado Law, you know, about every election, legislative cycle, we introduce some kind of legislation, you know, that tries to improve the landscape to prevent wrongful convictions. So, you know, a couple things that have happened in Colorado in the last like 5 to 7 years, or there's now a requirement that interrogations be recorded, and that's sort of a safeguard against false confessions. There's legislation that changes the way that eyewitness identifications are conducted. There's probably going to be a bill this upcoming session that would make it so that prosecutors could be personally liable for misconduct, whereas now they enjoy absolute immunity as individuals. So, you know, there's, you know, projects are always working not only on cases, but kind of, like I said, trying to change the landscape.
And I would add one other thing that I would add too, that if you guys are, you know, part of a, you know, church community or, you know, whatever, I mean, a spiritual community that you're part of, particularly, like I said, a church, synagogue, mosque, whatever you may be affiliated with, find out if they have a prison industry. I mean, not the not industry. Prison, I'm sorry about that, prison ministry. And so, you know, because one of the things that, like I said, that, you know, that even if you don't do nothing but have your community adopt a person coming home on parole to ensure that they have a job, that they have a place to stay, and these different things that I'm telling you that sending people back to prison is people that end up back in prison is you know, because they can't get a job, and you know, with some felonies, you can't get an apartment. All these different things that we need to be productive and be able to move forward and pick ourselves back up. There's a lot of roadblocks. So find out if your community have a prison ministry, and if they don't, start encouraging that it happens.
Yeah. There does seem to be a movement. Also, I mean, so much progress needs to be made. It's little drops of water in the bucket, but I hope so. I hope so. And with one lighthearted question, yes, there's another art person in the crowd. What are you working on now, Ndume?
I'm actually, I've been trying to work a little bit on this. I know you guys familiar with the Charlottesville piece a few years ago, and you know, and I'm sure you guys know about just kind of the history. And we've seen all this stuff that happened over this past summer in terms of just kind of this whole movement for racial justice and that stuff. So in the last year or so, I've been working on this art project where I've been, you know, after this Charlottesville deal happened, you know, when we had the former president talking about there was good people on both sides and that stuff there. Well, this whole this series of paintings that I'm doing is where I'm actually taking, you know, like some of these old lynching photographs. You can Google this stuff too, and it's amazing how you see how mobs of people would just get together with their kids and come out and participate in these lynchings and that stuff there. And so after the Charlottesville deal happened, I wanted to create this art series titled Black People Know the Good People of Charlottesville. And so that's kind of what I'm working on now, where I'm doing these, I want to kind of wrap these series of 8 or 10 paintings up, where I'm just kind of trying to create these visual arts pieces to stimulate some real dialogue around this whole issue of racial justice.
Wonderful.
Maybe once I get them did and wrapped up, we can have that at the library.
Yes, or even a more reputable gallery in town. So keep us posted.
I will.
Well, it's almost like I don't want this to end, but I do thank you both so very much. We're so proud of you both. You're doing amazing work and amazing living. So from our hearts, thank you so very much, and have a lovely evening. Well, I think if there are more questions, maybe I'll just email them to you. Not that you have to answer, but that to let you know what people who have heard you tonight are thinking and wondering about.
Yeah, you can email them to us. We would gladly answer them. You know, because I think there's some important stuff, and I just want to say, and I think that I speak for my wife when I say that we really appreciate the opportunity to just kind of, you know, share our story and be a part of this whole movement of, you know, kind of I say this sometime, you know, just kind of throwing this alarm clock in the graveyard of the walking dead, because there's so many people, you know, that don't know about some of this stuff that's happening to people, happened to me, and it's happening to people. Every week we see somebody getting out of prison after spending decades for something that they didn't do. So, and we should be treating people, you know, even the people that's sitting in prison that's guilty of what they're there for, we should be treating them different too.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You are so welcome, and blessings on you, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds
great.
great.
Hey,
Okay.
All
thanks
right.
a lot. Everybody have a good rest of the evening.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.